Super cool. I feel I will be like super boring now. But super cool talks. And I'm going to share my. Uh, can you see? No? Yeah? Okay. Okay. What? Here. Okay. So I'm Queralt. I'm based in Barcelona. And as Mesa very well said, I have a PhD in biomedicine. And after doing my PhD, as many people, I was very lost with my life. And even though I love science, I didn't want to stay in research. So I made this transition to scientific illustration and animation. And in my talk, I will try to guide you in how I went from one point to the other one and how I evolved to that and how I learn the different medias that I'm using nowadays to work as a freelancer, which it's been like this month I have been, it's my 2 years birthday as a freelancer. So I'm going to start. So as anybody that's working in research or academia or wherever or in our industry, we know that we tend to think that our job is to have an hypothesis, like make experiments, like make sure that they turn out well and we have the replicates and then make the paper. But another thing that is also happening a lot is that we are like communicating our research constantly, not only inside our group, but also the department, and then in what could be like conferences, even if it's like a talk or a poster, but also we are doing it for publication, as I said, but also to ask for fellowships, grants, to try to find collaborators, and sometimes like this part of communicating and promoting our research, it's getting in a very like second um, point of view, like compared to the research itself. Like even there are a lot of people that find it like, oh no, it's not necessary. Like my research will talk for itself. Like no, research doesn't talk. You have to put some effort to put it out there. So the main problem that we all know, but when we are starting to seriously work on research and being a scientist, we start to realize that it's even worse than we thought about it. It's that it's completely saturated. Like there is a lot of people doing research, doing very good research, and they are all out there talking to the same people as you. So the most probable thing is that you are going to be overlooked. Like if you don't have like something like catching attention, most probably you're in the poster there and people will just pass and go to another one because they know the person because it's more like well known than you, or because they have a better poster than you. So this is where visual marketing enters. And I'm not talking about visual marketing in the sense of like, oh, putting a beautiful envelope just to catch attention, but being extremely shallow. It's in the way of like having good research is not enough. So don't make it ugly and sabotage yourself. Because when I talk about aesthetics, I'm not talking about just being pretty or pleasant into the eyes, but I'm talking about intentional design and strategic planning. And something I really recommend is to check the webpage of Martin, and don't make me pronounce the surname, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this, but Martin, whatever, how is this pronounced? Like he's also a scientific illustrator and he has like this webpage with blogs and he takes posters and graphical abstracts from published work and he fixed the artwork. So you have the comparison and he explains the logic and the rationale behind it. So sometimes these people may catch your attention, but for the wrong reasons. Like it's not like well organized. The colors are like super saturated. Like some of them, it's like really hurting your eyes. And it's like losing them. Like if you see this, you don't get like very convinced by the work. But then it's very easy to put the same thing in a more organized way, choose the colors correctly, and and trying to organize everything better. So it catches the attention of the people, of the person that is seeing it, but it's also helping them go through the figure and understand it, which is the actual goal. Like being pretty to catch the attention is just like the first step. The real work of designing a figure is to have a good organization, a good layout, and that at the end of the day, when the person reads the figure, they understand which is the key message in that figure. And this was something that I was very interested in, because even though I choose to go through a scientific career path, I went to art school since I was like very little. So I was doing graffiti paintings, acrylic paintings. I was like doing ceramics basically since I was like 5 until I entered university. So I was like drawing and sketching all the time. It was never science actually. I was just like, like doing my own art about my own things. But when I started my PhD, people started to tell me like, Queralt, you're good at drawing. Why don't you make the figure for me? Because it looks horrible. Can you help me fix it? So I actually started doing figures with PowerPoint, and a postdoc in my lab was like, "Oh, you're very good with Illustrator." And I was like, "What? What's that?" And then he forced me to learn Illustrator, and then this is how my interest started. Like to try to make good figures, and for my presentations, for articles that I was making to help others. And I started to get very interested when people was actually coming to me saying like, hey, I stopped by because it was nice to see it. Like I could see something interesting in here, and I stopped to your poster so you could explain it to me, because it was interesting for me. And then, or when I was like making a presentation, they were like telling me like, oh, even though I am not working in this field, I could understand and visually understand everything because you made a very good figure. And this was like kind of like the fire that was like driving me to get more interested in it. So as I told you, I started to get interested in making figures, and once I learned how to use Illustrator, I made my next step. So I was a traditional, like doing traditional drawing and painting, but then I was like, okay, let's try to learn digital illustration, like raster illustration, which is like not vector, but with a, like pen, a pencil, and try to do things like are like more complex, not in the sense because a figure can be very complex, but like I think that each type of figure or type of illustration is useful for depending on the context. Like when you make a figure for a paper, that style and that thing, it's like maybe appropriate for that context, but it can be completely the contrary in another context. If you want to show something that it's very detailed, that it's realistic, that has depth, that it's for, I don't know, to explain how a species looks like, or to show, for example, anatomy, or sometimes to get a more like visceral reaction or empathic reaction from the audience, using a more realistic, like more like traditional style, it's much more beneficial than making a super flat and personal illustration, or very technical illustration that can be more like boring or intimidating in some cases. And a good example of that is when, for example, when you do covers, you're not going for the technical or super scientific reasoning. You are appealing more for the emotions. No, you want a more like you want to generate interest in the audience. You want them to see the cover and say like, oh, this looks interesting. What this is about? So they take the journal and they open it and they start to read. No, it's like this kind of more like human and emotional, more than having something like super detailed or well explained. You want to generate an interest, so they take the journal and they see the editorial of an article, they see the illustration and they get interested, so they open and they read the article. So in this case, you use like more like abstract and yes, I'm more like appealing to emotions. So just to show a little bit how I work in these cases. Just as an example, because I think that sometimes it's nice to see the behind of the scenes of projects. Sometimes they come to you with a concept and they are like, oh, we did like this CRISPR modification so the tumor is not detected by the immune cells. And they come like, we are thinking about something like this, no, like a tumor and it's not seen by the immune cells. And you start to say like, okay, we can make something more realistic or maybe like something more abstract, no? Like, okay, like the tumor is a bomb or something like this, no? And you start to explore. And then sometimes went with a very different concept to the one you start. So in this case, we end up with a very abstract concept from the initial one. So the chameleon with the little bumps is the tumor, and there were like some drones trying to catch him because he was like some kind of dangerous chameleon. And then it's also nice to see that as an artist or a creative, everything doesn't come from your own brain. Like it's nice to work with reference, try to find inspiration in other works, in other people, on the work of other people. And also when you're working with people that it's not specialized in an artistic field, it's also nice to them to try to understand what do you mean when you say like, oh, these colors or these palettes, why they work or why they don't work. And sometimes it's helpful, but you have to watch out to not make them confused with the result. So you end up with a final sketch and your cover. And I hope it was this fast when I do it, but this is it. And then when I felt like more comfortable with the whole illustration field, I made a jump with something I always wanted to try, which was animation. Because as Chloe said, I'm this kind of person that likes to do a lot of stuff at the same time. So I'm in the club. So it was not enough for me, and I started with animation. And in the case of animation, it's true that I started with 2D, but I'm also working in 3D. And a lot of people tend to ask me like, oh, which one is better? Or sometimes they think that 3D is like more for scientific or like medical fields, it's like more professional. But from my point of view, it's a matter of your needs. Like 2D can be playful and 3D can be very playful, as 2D can be serious and very professional as 3D. It's more a matter of which kind of style do you want to have, depending on your audience, and also sometimes which amount of budget and time you have to invest in making that project. Because it's true that 2D tends to be faster and cheaper to produce, but that doesn't make it like less efficient or good compared to 3D. So with the animations, when any kind of animation, you start making your storyboard. So you try to plan all the scenes, and making sure that all the elements are present. Like there is a lot of back and forth too, like comments, like going back, trying to fix it. But storyboards, it's something that I really like to emphasize, like the most important part of making an animation production. If you don't take your time to make a good storyboard, then everything goes like, oh, and it's a mess. And after that, you make the illustrations with the media that you need. And finally, you have your animation that normally looks like something like this, that it's not really nice or interesting or artistic at all, which is a lot of layers. And if you open them, there are a lot of keyframes, and sometimes it's very confusing. And finally, the magic happens, and you have your animations. And as I mentioned, like sometimes people think that, oh, that 2D animations have to have or 3D have a very specific style or feeling, but you have to be like more open-minded. Like they can have the style or the feeling that you want them to have. Like in this case, you can make something more flat, more stylized, if that is your interest. Or in this case, that they were like doing about a product that was purifying water to be reused, they wanted a more natural feeling and more organic feeling. So in this case, I mix more with a traditional like digital drawing style and some kind of like time-lapse animation with motion graphics. And then you get this whole different vibe into your animation. So there are seriously, if you start to try things and you put your effort, you can really achieve whatever you want. And in the case of 3D, that when sometimes you want something that it's like that has like more depth, or sometimes they can have like this more impact effect. It's also good to use it. And I like to show this because when I tell also my friends that I work with 3D, they are like, okay, but how this works? So most of the times what you see is like to make this neuron, it's just like all these mathematical operations. I had to relearn maths, and at some point I was like, one moment, how did it work out? And so basically it's like a lot of nodes like connected to try to generate like shapes with all my nodes to remember what I was doing. And the same, like then you put the shader, and it's again like a lot of nodes telling how to connect the colors and how to organize everything. And then it's this like repeated a lot of times. And from this several mathematical operations, that's why a lot of people doing bioinformatics are very good with 3D animations. Then you have your animation. And again, as I was telling before, with 3D, you can also have like very different vibes and styles. They can be more complex, more realistic, more simple, but they don't have to be like nowadays. They are making like nicer 3D animations, but before, like 10 years ago, for example, they were doing very dramatic medical animations or scientific animations. Like if you look for older medical animation, it's like a horror movie. Like they put like very, dramatic music in the back and everything looks dark. And suddenly there is like, oh, and somebody with a very low voice, like, cancer is happening. It's like, okay, come on, we don't have to do this, no? So it's true that sometimes you can do something more organic, but you can do something like much more simple that is appealing to much more audiences, that it's much more technical, much more clean, and people will understand even it better than if it's like something super complex. And they are very useful. And the most important part is that when you make any kind of illustration, animation, any kind of material, it's very important that if you invest your time or you're hiring someone to do it, like be smart and reuse it. Like don't stop in having that illustration or that animation. Like from the animation, you can take shorts for social media. You can post it in the website of your lab or or your institution. You can use like snapshots of the scenes to use in presentations. Figures can be reused by other people in the lab or updated or modified in the case if it's for a paper, something more complex, or if it's for a presentation, like something more simpler, so people can follow better. So don't stay there. Like if you put I'm always telling the same. If you put the effort to do something, like exploit it at the maximum. And this is how I evolved to do all the things I'm doing right now. And I mean, I hope you found it interesting. So thank you very much for listening. Well, this is my web and email, but basically you can find me everywhere. So if you Google my name. and now I will introduce Pedro, aka Pedromix, who does scientific comics, which is one of my favorite type of comics.